Oh, welcome to Full Disclosure. It's Christopher Gilliam, and I've been away way too long. Sadly, we had a passing in the family. We've been out in Arizona for the past week and a half or so, taking care of that. So, apologies for sort of going off the grid there on you like that. But coming up here on June 24th, for those of you following me on YouTube, I'll go ahead and share my screen. If you're looking to follow me on YouTube, you just go in, type my name, ChristopherGilliam as in Mary, and I come up right away. There's, my channel's right there. Subscribe to it, and you can basically follow what I'm sharing on the screen, which I think makes the content a lot more interesting. Right now, I'm sharing this flyer from Americans for Prosperity for Wisconsin. They're having an event called Defending Democracy Over Dessert. They're having it on June 24th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's going to be at 1806 East Warden Street at the Eau Claire Field Office. Again, that's 1806 East Warden Street in Eau Claire. That's being hosted by Allie Pickens. She's got a contact phone number if you're interested in RSVPing. That's 715 716 6670. Or she has an email at apickens@afphq.org. Again, that phone number 715 716 6670. I'm going to be speaking there for a few minutes, and they're going to cover how does the PRO Act impact you. And it's basically an act that's reforming labor rights, and it's something that should be a pretty good event. We're also catering there. I have a bakery, Wildflower Bakery, so if you like donuts and goodies and stuff like that, if nothing else, get some good food. But yeah, I'm super excited for that. June 24th, 6 to 8 p.m. and at the Eau Claire Field Office, 1806 East Warden Street. So we'll be speaking about that. I'm going to be doing an episode too where I cover that bill in depth, very similar to how I did the Georgia bill. Now, while I was away in Arizona, I also got a chance to read the Texas bill. I just got back in late last night, so I don't have the notes or anything for that prepared. You're going to be seeing that very shortly here. I have a lot of backlog content to cover with you guys. But a good summary about that Texas bill is that very similar to the Georgia bill. I read it. Guess what? No racism, no oppression, or anything like that the media is saying. When I do an episode here covering it similar to how I covered the Georgia bill, which I'm also going to be rebroadcasting for those of you on EC Hometown Radio who haven't seen it, who haven't gotten a chance to listen to that. We basically cover the bill itself step by step. And the reason I do that, the reason I read a lot of these laws and actually cover it and post links, which is particularly useful for those of you following me on YouTube, is because it really cuts out a lot of the opinion, and it cuts straight to the heart of the matter. It cuts straight to the truth of controversial topics. For example, with a lot of the voting reform, we've seen one side of the media. Maybe you're just a guy who you're working 9 to 5 and you're not super informed on politics. Well, what are you supposed to believe if you've got some media stations saying it's racist and it's horrible and it's hurting people, and then you got the other side saying that's all lies, it's good? Well, you cut straight through the BS and you go right to the heart of the matter, and you look at the bill yourself, and that's what we do here. And a lot of people don't do that. As far as I know, nobody in media does that. And I mean, once you do, you figure out very quickly, once you're looking at the truth, take it or leave it, who's lying to you and who's who you can trust as far as media coverage is concerned. That's why I do that. So, we'll be doing that very shortly here. A little bit of a spoiler alert. The reason that Democrats are PO'd about that bill is because it basically outlaws vote harvesting. And it also makes it to where any organization caught doing ballot harvesting is subject to some pretty hefty fines, up to and including the cost of an entire campaign coming out of their pocket, and even the election potentially being overturned if if the person victimized can prove, hey, these ballot harvesters are the reason I lost this election here in the state of Texas. So, I mean, it's very interesting. What you have is paid for ballot harvesting services that, maybe they're going picking up old people, popping them in the van, voting for them. You wouldn't believe this sort of thing can happen, but with mail-in ballots, it's very easy. They're popping them in the van. The people doing this are getting paid to do it, and these people have been caught before filling out people's ballots for them. It's pretty disturbing stuff. And the state of Texas said, no, you can't do that. You can't pay people to go in and more or less intimidate and take advantage of the elderly, in order to swing elections. You can't do that. You can still go provide community service for free, such as, the way Republicans often do, where, maybe somebody who has a van shuttles the elderly or people without vehicles down to the voting center where they can lawfully cast their own ballot, which I see nothing wrong with. But it's very interesting to me that one side of the aisle takes part in this practice and the other, as far as I know, really doesn't. So, we'll get into the details of that very shortly here. There's going to be a lot of episodes here coming at you over the next week. One of the laws I want to get into reading about too is HR 1. That is a massive bill. It's well over 700 pages, and there's been a lot of controversy about it for quite some time. This isn't the first time that they've tried to push it through Congress, and, verify it into law. I don't think it will ever become law. I think the hurdles are just too great. I have a hard time seeing the majority of the House, the Senate approving the bill based on what I know is in it so far. And then a president not vetoing it, and then the Supreme Court saying, yeah, this is constitutional. Eventually we're going to cover some of that stuff, but, a couple spoiler alerts, typically bills that say it's okay for convicted felons who murdered people that are still serving time to cast ballots. That stuff usually doesn't make it. So that's just one of many atrocities in that bill. Speaking of laws, while I was out in Arizona, I saw some pretty interesting things compared to Wisconsin, and there's a lot of snowbirds who live in this state, especially older people. Wintertime, they'll go down to Arizona or Florida. Those, by far, in my line of work, I have discovered those are by far the two most common states that snowbirds from Wisconsin travel to, Arizona and Florida. And what was interesting to me about Arizona is that there is a lot of trash in the state of Arizona, particularly on the highways. There's so much littering, it is absurd. That desert's basically been turned into a trash heap for, anyone who's never been to Arizona. It's a desert state, and, from Phoenix all the way down to Tucson, the entire highway is just littered with garbage. You can see anything from blown tires, mattresses, stuff that's fallen out of the back of people's little haulers, wrappers, you name it. It is all over the place. Twisted metal. It's really sad to see. It's a stark comparison here to Wisconsin, and it almost looks like there's it looks like the planet from that video game Borderlands, the planet Pandora. For those of you who've never seen or played that game, it's a game that takes place on a fictional planet called Pandora, where the entire planet is basically used as the galaxy's landfill. So, every planet in this fictional universe just sort of sends their garbage to this planet and just jettisons it off there. that's basically what Arizona looks like now. Just imagine a wrecked desert landscape looking, just garbage everywhere. It's really terrible. My thought when I saw that was like, first off, I wonder what are the fines for somebody who gets caught littering. You know, um, it's certainly a statewide issue. It's not something, because you see it all the way from Phoenix to Tucson, and so I would think that's definitely something that the state itself has to crack down on with help from the counties and the local communities. But I know if it were me, I'd be proposing something like, how about we multiply the fee for littering here by 10? Not even kidding, you get caught doing this, it's 10 times the fee. And to incentivize the officers to enforce it, maybe they get 10% of the cut of that. Might sound extreme, but I mean, the amount of littering there, it's unbelievable. It's unacceptable. You could take every single person on probation, doing community service, serving time in prison, and I can't imagine. It would probably take them years to clean it up. That's how out of control it is. And that's another thing I would, if they're not already doing that, you think they should do that. You got felons doing hard time. Here, go earn 17 cents an hour to pay back the restitution for the people you harmed and clean this place up. It's something. I mean, you can't leave it the way it is. It's definitely something. If I were a state assemblyman in Arizona, I would be looking to address that yesterday. But just a crazy thing to see out there. I get to thinking about these laws and stuff, and one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about, just to citizens in general, is basically the laws governing our community in general. We basically, a lot of people don't know this. We live under 4 tiers of laws. We live under local, county, state, and federal law all at the same time. So I mean, we're basically under 4 spheres of government at any time. A lot of people don't realize that. It's it's something that got brought up to me back in, I want to say maybe 8th or 9th grade, but it's easy to forget. And what people don't realize is the way it can affect you is, I mean, you look, it's kind of federal, state, county, township, city, all these things are governing you at once. We, the people, of course, at the top, ultimately decide the laws through, democratic representation, through a constitutional republic, and that's great and all. Guess the reason I'm talking about this is because it's, when you think of 4 different tiers of government governing your everyday life, it can apply to you in your day-to-day life in a really surprising way. There's so many laws, tens of thousands of laws that are governing you at every single moment that, unless you're an autistic savant who reads every single law that could ever apply to you, there's no way to know them all. And the way that can be applied in the real world, I think about law enforcement a lot, and I am always saying that, here in Chippewa, we're blessed to have really outstanding law enforcement. I've noticed, in my lifetime, definitely a growing trend of, at this point, it's getting to an alarming rate, sort of a growing trend of disrespect for the police. And say, they're criminals themselves, and they're out to get you, and they don't care about us, and they're thugs, and blah blah. I've heard all this rhetoric before, and in fact, once upon a time when I was a young man, I believed it myself. I thought that was true, and it's just not the case, and especially when you look at law enforcement as a whole, it is just not the case. And you got to remember, there's tens of thousands of laws governing you, and what's interesting about how that can come up in day-to-day life is that at some point, if you encounter law enforcement, you may very well have a disagreement about whether or not you actually committed some sort of violation. And that's where you see things sometimes get a little bit out of control. And one example I could give you, I've read about half of the laws now just for Chippewa Falls alone. And most of it's just stuff like, hey, we're annually the government shall, the local government will have a budget on this date in October. We're going to do an annual budget by this deadline. Just to kind of have a structure. That's what a lot of it is. A lot of it's the fire code and how the fire department will be organized, and how many members of it there will be, stuff like that. But there's also local ordinances as far as public nuisances go, stuff like that. Have any of you ever seen the videos on YouTube of these people, these kind of disrespectful people that are they're recording with their phone, they're recording the cops, they're going to, they'll have some sort of buzz slogan on the video like, I know my rights. They'll be recording some officer and being just kind of a, they'll be kind of being confrontational. You see these videos, they're popular for some reason, of people being confrontational with law enforcement. And it can be things from, I have the right to record, or I don't have to show ID. That's a big one. I always say, I don't have to show ID. F you, I don't have to do that. And what's interesting to me is you're really playing with fire when you do this. And here's why. I couldn't tell you in the state of Wisconsin if you're required to show an ID or not to law enforcement. I couldn't. Maybe you're not. Maybe there's nothing in there. I couldn't tell you if on the federal level. I would assume, since there's some states where potentially you don't have to show ID. I doubt there's anything in federal saying you must show your ID to a law enforcement official. However, in the city of Chippewa Falls, there is a local ordinance that if the police ask you for ID, you are required to present ID. So you can imagine some of these videos where you see these people kind of getting away with this, and they happen to pull that in the wrong local municipality, or if the officer there knows there's a local municipality where, yes, you do have to show ID, suddenly you're in handcuffs, just like that. And then you're sitting there going, they're pressing my rights. And da, 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 da. So that's my point to all this. If you're an everyday citizen, you're going to get, you do have a police confrontation of some sort. You can't possibly know all the laws, and chances are they don't either. Now, that being said, the police deal with the laws every day in some aspect or form. They're not lawyers, sure, but they tend to be very familiar with at least their local ordinances. They come across stuff every day. This is especially true the longer they serve. But at the same time, there's tens of thousands of laws governing you in 4 different tiers, as we can see here. For those of you following me on YouTube, again, I'm kind of showing a pyramid of the tiers of governance that surround you in your everyday life. And it's very possible that an officer does get it wrong, right? When you got tens of thousands of laws, it can absolutely happen. You might be sitting there, maybe you're getting a ticket written to you, and maybe it's wrong. Maybe you don't agree with it. Maybe you think it's wrong. Maybe you suspect it's wrong. I think the worst thing you can do is attribute malice where, maybe he just gets it wrong. It's very easy to do when you got that many laws surrounding you, and the laws change year after year as well, because ultimately we, the people, elect people. New representatives come, new representatives go. They draft new laws, they amend laws, and it's always changing. For all that guy could be going off something that was true 5 years ago that isn't now. That's completely possible. So, what do you do when you're in that situation? You're getting a ticket and you don't agree with it, or whatever. Maybe you're being arrested for something you don't. Here's one for you. I saw a guy who was He was being pulled by a truck while riding a skateboard and holding onto a rope. True story. I saw this a couple months ago, and you know what I did? I called the cops, and I wasn't trying to ruin the guy's life or anything. And just like, well, that's, pretty reckless. I understand it's a couple guys just trying to have some fun, pass the time. I called the cops. I was like, I haven't seen anything so far specifically in city law saying, you will not pull people on a skateboard or a scooter or whatever in your car. I haven't seen that yet. Granted, I've read half of the city laws. Doesn't mean there isn't something in the state law about it. Doesn't mean there isn't something in federal law. Maybe there's nothing about it at all. I really don't know. Kind of appealing to common sense on this one, saying, well, if nothing else, that's probably not a good idea to pull yourself on by truck on a skateboard. Even if it's not illegal, it's certainly reckless. It's dangerous, and not to mention, I mean, we have a quality EMS and fire system here as well, and a big part of why we have a quality system. Have you ever wondered how come some cities have a good one, some have a terrible one? A lot of it does come down to budget, but a lot of it also comes down to how we in the community behave. If you can carbon copy Chippewa Falls, let's say you copy paste it, pretend you can do that for a minute, but let's say you make the citizens in the copy 6 times as reckless. Well, you're going to have more claims to the city. It costs the city money every time they have to dispatch. The city's insurance and all that is likely going to go up. And all of a sudden, even though the only thing you've changed is how reckless people are, you don't have as good of a fire and EMS system anymore. So, I mean, I see something like that, and I'm like, if this guy falls off his skateboard and, hits his head or something, that's, a pretty preventable, just senseless way to, not only risk that guy's life, but, you're really ruining the value of the community in a way that, is maybe you don't think about it, I don't think that guy was thinking about that. Point is, let's take this story and let's say hypothetically the guy gets pulled over by cops, and I don't know, but let's say there is no law against it. I'm guessing there probably is, and I'm saying don't do what that guy did, because it's a stupid thing to do. So don't take this as a green light to go be an idiot. But let's say for the sake of argument, let's say hypothetically there's no law against it, but the officer writes him a ticket, or maybe even cuffs him, takes him in. Okay, so instead of spazzing out and making things worse, go, I don't know my rights, and get in a confrontation. Well, even if you were in the right in the first place, if it suddenly escalates and now you've got assaulting an officer, resisting arrest, well, that is a real crime. We all know that. And I see this a lot where you take somebody that maybe there was a disagreement, or maybe they were actually in the right, but because they escalate the situation, a real crime comes about, and they end up getting charged worse than if they would have cooperated. The place to argue and fight is in court. You hash it out in court. That's what you do. I mean, I can give you an example of this. Years and years ago, I had a parking violation in Menominee for there was no local ordinance about it or something, so I thought it was BS, and I challenged it. I was a lot more ignorant, went to court over it, made a big deal out of it. Turns out there was a state law that covered it, and I was dead in the wrong. And by the time I got to see the judge over it, I realized I was dead in the wrong. Had nowhere to go. But point is I didn't chase down that officer and be like, "Oh, you give me ticket," and make a big stink out of it. That's not going to get me anywhere. Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. The place to decide it is in court is my point, and it's actually amazing to me how many people, I think they just don't realize that. I think they honestly don't realize that the courtroom is where you can solve that, and where you can make your case and you can argue. And let's say you're in the wrong, like I was. You go in there, and I'd already had the appointment set and whatnot, and I appear, and I was like, yeah, I changed my mind on it. And I guess at this point I got to take responsibility for it, right? And it ends up being a minor fine, and that's it. It could have been worse, but I think you get a judge and prosecutor or whatever that, okay, this person's taking responsibility. They do understand that the laws are, that there are tens and tens of thousands of them. I mean, what do we hire lawyers for, right? Do you think lawyers know every single law? They don't. They just know how to find the laws that pertain to you. So what I'm saying, advice I'd give you, I guess, for living through your day-to-day life, whether it's encounters with the police or disagreements with your workplace, or maybe you're working somewhere where there's a hostile work environment and whatnot. Somewhere in this great pyramid of laws, there are definitely things that apply to you. So what do you do? Like, how do you navigate all that? Some ways you can do it is, go here to, the city of Chippewa Falls. We'll look at a couple things here. So chippewafalls-wisconsin.gov. For those of you following me on YouTube, I'm sharing my screen on this right now. For those of you on hometown radio, what I did is I just went to the local ordinance site for Chippewa Falls, and what it is it's just chippewafalls-wi.gov. And right here on the front page, bottom right, there's a tab that says City Ordinances. And if you end up clicking on that, you get this library that pops up. It's divided into chapters, and you can basically look up what might apply to, whatever your concern is. Maybe something to do with the gas heating code or the zoning code. Maybe you're having some sort of, maybe you feel you're being denied some sort of zoning permit illegally or something, and you can look that up, starting at the local level right here very quickly. You don't have to read every single law that the ordinance has. If maybe you look that up and that's not right for you, you can always go and you can basically, let's see here, Wisconsin State Legislature. So now what I did is I opened up the state legislature site. Again, if you're on YouTube following me, that's search for me, Christopher Gilliam, on YouTube, and you can actually follow this real time. Makes it a lot easier if you're on hometown radio. The website for this is legis.wisconsin.gov, and here you can actually look up all of your bills. You can look up all your state bills, and there's quite a few of them. Law and legislation tab is on the right. You can look up a little more than that, but you can look up statutes related, statutes table of contents. You can even look up the state constitution, very easily. So, I went into the table of contents here on the state legislature, and there's a lot. There is a lot of stuff here, much bigger than your local municipality. There's approximately 995 chapters. Now, obviously, you're not going to read all that, right? But it's divided up into sections. All the chapters on criminal procedure, the one chapter on newspaper publication, civil procedure, municipal court procedure, small claims, actions and proceedings in special cases, gaming, the state lottery, bingo and raffle, anything that society in the state of Wisconsin has thought of, vehicles, traffic stuff. We have state highway patrol, right? that are officers of the state rather than your municipality. My point, and the reason I'm bringing all this up, we even have our election laws here. I've actually read every single law on election in this state. The reason I bring all this up is, let's say you find yourself in some, maybe you think your rights are being violated in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure somewhere in here we have, stuff on employment law, as far as the state's concerned. And, maybe you need some legal help. That I'm not an advocate. I'm not telling you go be your own lawyer. Go interpret the law on your own means. You contact a professional. That's what you should do. But you can help that professional out greatly if you know what you're looking at. Like that example I had earlier, where I learned, reading the local laws that in Chippewa Falls, an officer can ask you for identification legally. If I have questions about that, instead of screaming at the officer in real time, going, that's unconstitutional, I'm going to consult a professional, about it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to consult with a lawyer and bring my questions about that, or is this a constitutional ordinance? Is this, does this mean what I think it means? Stuff like that, But they will be able to help you so much more if you ever need a lawyer. When you're saying, you think about it, if you're going to somebody and you're saying, what, I think my election rights have been violated. And they're like, okay, what happened? And you're like, well, the guy, and he yelled at me, and then he kicked me out, and I think he just didn't like me because I had a Trump hat on. If I'm a lawyer, I'm looking at you going like, what am I supposed to do with that? Next thing you know, they're charging you filing fees, and they're going, oh yeah, I charge $800 an hour. And the reason they're doing that to you is because it's, you look at even just the local and state laws we just looked at, and it's like, good Lord, I have to pay my paralegals to look to sift through all this, and look, I'm not even sure if this guy has a case. What's he talking about? On the other hand, if I'm going to him going, hey, I think I think there was a violation of Wisconsin election law. I think Chapter 10. There was no election notice whatsoever in the town. And I mean, right here in Chapter 10, it specifically says, there's supposed to be these election notices. I'm consulting with you about this to make sure I have this right, but I believe I didn't know the place where we cast ballots moved, because I believe there was a violation of election notice law. I think if I'm reading this right, they were supposed to post a notice a week ahead of time, and they didn't post a notice at all. Do I have this right? Well, you're probably going to get a lot more help. And it's very easy to find this stuff if you know where to look. You can do it all the way at the federal level, congress.gov. And I mean, well, if you thought there was a lot of laws for the state, oh boy. But maybe if you're looking for workplace laws, for example, the bill HR 842 that I just read, we're going to be doing an episode on that too, and that has to do with workplace law and stuff like that. People's right to collectively assemble and bargain. So I mean, it's obviously a lot of work to go through and read the appropriate laws. But if you ever find yourself in a situation, it goes far beyond police, but it can involve police too, sure. Or if you're ever arrested, you don't have to know all your rights. You just need to know where to find them. So I mean, again, for those of you following me on EC Hometown Radio, I'm going to have the links to these places in the description. I'll have them for you guys on YouTube as well that are following me in real time. Congress.gov, legis.wisconsin.gov, and then Chippewa Falls-Wisconsin.gov. So you can take a look at this stuff, and I mean, you never know when this stuff could come in handy and really save your butt. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that, and one of the big things I want to do too is you want to help sort of minimize some of what law enforcement goes through every day, where they're trying their best to enforce these laws to the best of their ability. These ever-changing tens of thousands of laws, and most of where you'd encounter law enforcement is going to be on the city level, and sometimes on maybe the county or state level, where it's there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a state law saying, guess there's federal laws on the interstate, right? You're not going to find a speed limit sign anywhere that says it's okay to go 130 miles per hour, right? And I mean, those are no-brainers, but it helps to understand that the best thing to do, whoever you're kind of disagreeing with, whatever party you're disagreeing with about the laws, it is better to be civil and to know where you can get the information, and sort of fact check yourself and see if you're right or wrong. And once you have that information, you think you have a case, that's where you consult with a professional. If it's something really, really minor, like maybe it's a traffic stop in town for going 1 mile over the speed limit, maybe you don't need a lawyer for that. Maybe you just go in and make your case to the judge, something like that. But understanding where to make your case and how to take action if you think the laws have been not applied correctly to you. I think that's important. I think every citizen should know that. I'm a big believer that this kind of thing, what we just covered, should be taught in K through 12 education at the appropriate grade and age. I don't know why it isn't. Don't get me wrong. Reading, writing, math, history, all that stuff. Very important. Science. I think how to function in your own society is equally important, especially since the law is so complicated. It's surprising to me that we don't do that. We should definitely be doing that. I think every person deserves the opportunity, because I mean, you grow up into adulthood, and unless a family member or somebody that's told you this stuff, or you're fortunate enough to go to a school district where maybe the right teachers said the right things to tip you off to this kind of stuff, a lot of people viewing this might be 40, 50, 60 years old and have no idea any of this exists, and it's going to be pretty tough to get through your life without some bumps and bruises if you don't know any of this. God knows, I wish earlier in my life I had known a lot of this stuff. I was a very different person when I was younger, and I mean, there's times where I either would have kept my mouth shut, or handled my grievance the right way, if I'd known all this information, if I'd understood the way things actually work. So basically all I'm trying to do is promulgate that information here in this episode. I've been reading a lot of laws lately. I've been thinking a lot about the law lately, and how it gets written, where it comes from, and how it affects our day-to-day life, and how it can affect your outlook on the world based on what you know and what you don't. So stumbling on information like this throughout my life definitely clarified things and made my life better. No question about it. I think right now, as it relates to the schools, we have school districts in this country that I'm not kidding you, have a literacy rate under 15%. There's I was reading an article a long time ago, maybe 3-4 months ago, about that. There's a school district that Christopher Rufo did an article on. Forgive me, I don't remember where it is. It was Pennsylvania or one of the Carolinas. I think it was in Philadelphia somewhere. And there's a school district there where in there was a sort of humanities or history class where what they were teaching is they were teaching the kids how to stage a Black Panther rally, Black Panther protest to free Angela Davis, who was a convicted domestic terrorist. I think back in the 70s or so. That I don't find that to be very helpful educationally for anybody. That you think time like that could probably be more wisely used on something like what we just covered. That would be a lot more helpful to those children than here's how you protest for the release of a convicted criminal. I don't think that's very helpful. I really don't. I'm not saying it doesn't have its place in society in the right circumstances, certainly not for that particular individual. But I think this is where we're going wrong a lot with our schools in this country is, we're wasting taxpayer dollars on, can you even call that education? I don't think you can. Not surprisingly, what it translates in that school district is a literacy rate under 15%. Just citing Christopher Rufo on that, forgive me, I don't have information here at my fingertips. I just kind of thought of this on the fly. But to put that into perspective, there's third world countries in Africa that have literacy rates almost 5 times as high as that. 52% literacy rate in a lot of countries in Africa. Where they have Ebola outbreaks, where that's for the United States of America. We got to do better than that. There shouldn't be any district in this country that does that poorly. That's a huge failure to the students that are unlucky enough to go to that district. So I'm a big advocate of school choice for one. If you live in a zip code anywhere in this country where the school you're going to has a 15% literacy rate or less, it's just a complete hellhole. If you're willing to, take the time or make the drive to send your kids somewhere better, you should be allowed to do that. And the taxpayer dollars for that student should go to the school that deserves it. They should be competing for that funding at the very least. Personally, I'm entertained the idea of completely privatizing schools, in general. And I haven't fully fleshed out my thoughts on that yet. But what's clear is that we definitely have school districts in this country. I think everyone can agree that are not helping anybody. And they're run by bureaucrats that do not care about those kids one bit. It's all they care about is getting their funding. You can see that reflected in subtle ways in some of these school districts too, where the front office has all brand new leather furniture, but the kids don't have an education to speak of. It's terrible. That sort of thing should never happen. I think civics as it is should be in the classroom. I think understanding how the law as a whole works around you should be in the classroom. I think economics should be in the classroom, not as an elective or, one course that you take your senior year. I think it should be core, economics particularly. I did an episode a few weeks back on just some of the things we talked about. We talked about, what was it? We talked about housing regulations and how economics ties into that. And economics is another subject that I care very much for, because once you understand the science of it, once you understand the numbers behind it, it cuts through a lot of the opinion, and you're left with facts. And facts is where we can stem some good ideas from. Opinion, it's pretty hit or miss. We want as many facts as we possibly can when we're coming up with ways to write laws or amend laws or even just what our culture and our society should be, how we should behave. Um, I think facts are going to take you a lot further on that stuff than your opinion or how you feel. It's well, what do the facts actually say? You might think, take the death penalty, right? That's a controversial topic, right? Okay, so I was reading an article the other day about a man who, he just got released from, his third felony that year. And what's he do? He goes randomly finds a middle schooler on her skateboard, stabs her 25 times, strangles her, kills her. Random act of senseless violence. You take a person like that. I don't know what kind of life you have to lead to end up thinking that's okay, or to be enough of a monster to do something like that. I hear a lot of talk about reform. We should be reforming inmates, this and that, and tough on crime is harsh and barbaric and draconian and all this. Well, you take a really extreme crime like that, and I say, do you really want to run the chance of trying to reform somebody like that? Where, guess what? If you get the reform wrong, you let that person out, it's going to be somebody else's kid going home in a body bag. Um, so I mean, the reform argument, I guess we can debate it, case by case. You want to talk about reform for like nonviolent offenders, I'm all ears. Once you start establishing a pattern of violence and just unwillingness to function in our society the way the majority of us have agreed you ought to behave, that's where I think, depending on the crime, maybe the death penalty is warranted. Because what are we supposed to do with somebody like that who so blatantly refuses to, I think 99.99999% of individuals in this society have decided, you don't get to go and murder children. Not okay. So when you can't even agree with that, how our society should function, and you cross that line where you're just blatantly like, nah, I do whatever I want, and no remorse, no nothing. I don't know what else you can do with somebody like that. I really don't. I don't think anybody else has come up with an answer on that either. And I think, refusing to take that person out of society at that point, I honestly think it's cowardice. You're just sort of passing the buck to somebody else, or not wanting to deal with it, not wanting to accept the reality of what an individual like that has done. So I know it's not easy to discuss what we do in those really extreme cases. Somebody like that. For people that are anti-death penalty at any cost, I have a very hard time believing that if that was their middle schooler that happened to, that they would still feel the same way. I don't buy it. I really don't. And I don't think it goes to vengeance, or even with the Bible, eye for an eye. It's beyond that. It's what can you do with somebody that crosses a line that says, I will never agree to the way we ought to live in this society. What can you do with them? The only other thing I can think of is exile. And still, I don't think that does any form of justice really for the victim's family. So, I don't think you do capital punishment because it's easy, or because it's fun or a great thing, or anything like that. It's you do it because there's this there are some crimes in this society that it's just, I don't think here in the mortal world there's really any other answer for. So anyhow, at this point, you're going to see a lot more upcoming content here. I've got a lot of ideas for episodes, a lot of stuff that I want to share with you guys. I think I've gone on long enough on this one for now. Again, for those of you who are following me on Hometown Radio, if you want to see the video version where I share my screen and go through my sources in real time, easiest way to find me is just search my name. That seems to be what pops up the easiest. Christopher Gilliam. That's ChristopherGilliam as in Mary. And that's the easiest way to find me on YouTube. And then you subscribe and you can actually follow a lot of the bills that we go through. We can you'll get to see me basically get to the heart of the matter and the truth on all sorts of issues as they come up throughout our time on here. It's certainly been fun doing it with the voting bills, and I think it's really eye-opening too when you can go to a legitimate, irrefutable source of truth like that. I think it's really eye-opening, and I think it helps the general public know who they can trust to give them information and who they can't. I like the idea of giving my viewers the power to disseminate information as accurately as possible. That way they can make the best decisions possible on this sort of stuff. I think this has become sort of a necessary step. We hear the words disinformation, misinformation, all that a lot. We hear that all the time. And I think it's high time with the technology we have that, it's not 1962 anymore. We don't have to listen to a handful of news stations and just say, well, I like that one better and they seem nicer. I think they know what they're talking about. Nope, we live in the digital age, and if we're willing to do the work, we can see for ourselves who's full of crap and who's telling the truth. And we don't even have to go to the news if we don't want to. We can circumvent them completely, and we can look up what's true, especially in what governs our lives. And throughout the course of this channel, we're going to do that with more than just laws. We're going to look up, what would have been a great idea was during the George Floyd trial. It would have been really neat to be able to look up, in real time, the police reports, the toxicology reports, all the evidence that once upon a time would have been very difficult to get a hold of. But it's easier than ever now if you know where to look. I mean, I think this is the beginning too of the era of legacy media, as we would call it, being sort of on, not necessarily completely on their way out, but we do have the power to hold them accountable in a way that just could not be done even 10 or 15 years ago. And I think you're starting to see that in the ratings of certain news organizations. CNN just fell out of the top 10 in most watched broadcasts. Why? Because so many people have held them accountable with things like what we're doing right now. I mean, you can only get caught with your pants down so many times, no matter how big you are, before your house of cards starts falling apart. Don't get me wrong, CNN, they're the ones I harp on the most because, in my opinion, they're one of the worst. But they still have a lot of institutional power, in the sense that when they make up some sort of article, or like what they did with the Georgia voting thing, the Georgia voting law, when they were blatantly saying people aren't allowed to vote on weekends, aren't allowed to have water in line, stuff like that. And then you read the actual law and find out the opposite is true. Well, you can only get caught with your pants down so many times, no matter how big you are doing that. But when you come up with a story like that, you got to realize a lot of where CNN still gets a lot of power and makes a lot of revenue is, they sell and they make money off of a lot of internet news sites that, who do you think they're sourcing? What you got to realize is if you're sitting there, maybe you're a younger guy and you're going, well, that doesn't apply to me. I've never watched that. Here I am. I just turned 34, right? A lot of people my age and younger are going, well, I've never even watched CNN, so what does that have to do with me? Well, you probably watch it or get your information from places like that far more than you think. Have you ever seen a news article on Facebook that linked to BuzzFeed or Axios or some other website that nobody's ever even heard of? Where do you think a lot of the sources are from? It's from the major news publications, whether it's Fox, MSNBC, CNN, or whoever else. ABC, ABC is an interesting one. They're owned by Disney, so when you see Disney doing thanking the Chinese government and whatnot, and then you're watching their subsidiary news company, you got to realize you're basically watching Chinese news, stuff like that. It's funny how when you do the digging on this, you learn all this stuff. But that's why you end up looking up the actual facts and finding out that some of these major publications actually aren't very honest with you. But they still have all that power because where they're reaching younger people is they're selling those stories, even if they're worthless, even if they're not backed by truth, even if they're complete garbage. They're selling it. What matters is its content, and it gets clicks. They sell it to some online publication or blogger or whatever, and next thing you know, you're watching CNN and you don't even know it. And that's how these people maintain power. It should be really telling that CNN is nosediving out of television ratings, and they don't seem concerned at all. There's a reason for that. So I always kind of chuckle when I meet people, in my own age demographic or younger that are like, I don't watch news, but then they end up parroting the same points that you would see on the TV broadcast, and it's like, where do you think you got it from? they you have to be really careful, particularly on the internet, where you can't really trust anyone but yourself, I guess is my point, and in my experience, the ones that I personally have found that when I play at devil's advocate and when I basically test their credibility, the ones that haven't disappointed me so far, where I can say I have thoroughly done that, one is Steven Crowder. He might be a bit raunchy for too many people, but because he is a comedy show first, but give him credit, nobody else cites their sources like that. Every news publication should do that. But he has yet to disappoint me when I have, tested his credibility the way we do on this show. The other one has been Ben Shapiro. He's may not like what either of them say. That's fine, but that's not really what I care about. I care about the fact that if I'm going to outsource my trust to somebody else, that I know they're going to deliver. But you can't just go, well, again, it's 2021. You can't go, well, I like what he says. Not good enough. This is where it starts with holding these people accountable. So, anyways, that's I've missed doing this. It's been a long week and a half in Arizona, and it's nice to finally be back and be able to do some talking. So, anyhow, there's going to be plenty more episodes here coming up. We have a lot to talk about. Stuff with critical race theory, stuff with a group that I just discovered that is an organization that statewide is monitoring school boards and combating critical race theory. We're going to go over what is critical race theory, because you have one party saying that it's bad and you need to stop it, and you have the other party, the Democrats, saying that's just the Republicans' boogeyman. We're going to go into what it actually is so that you can decide for yourself. We're going to cover the Texas voting bill, which is super fun. I think some people are going to get a laugh out of that. We're going to cover, again, don't forget that Defending Democracy Over Dessert event, June 24th, 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to cover the bill that I'm going to be talking about in that. And, if you want to come to that event, again, 1806 East Warden Street, June 24th, 6 to 8 p.m. And if you have questions about it, you can contact Allie Pickens at 715-716-6670. So, maybe I'll see a couple of you guys there. That would be really awesome. So, well, that's it for now. Keep your eyes open. There's going to be a lot of episodes coming this week. We have a lot to catch up on, and I'm really excited to do it. So, all right, that's all. Thanks for watching.